على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. Tonight, we will begin the last 10 nights of the blessed month of Ramadan, and our tahajjud program will start at 3:45 a.m. and Fajr will become 10 minutes after Adhan. So the Iqamah will be 10 minutes instead of 15, because most people will be here already, or they'll be going home to have their suhoor and coming back quickly, so it's only be 10 minutes between the Adhan and the Iqamah, inshaAllah ta'ala. The concept that I'm going to share with you today within the Tazkiyah series is one of great importance from a practical perspective, and I am not going in perfect sequence throughout this series of concepts, meaning some of these concepts should be talked about earlier on in a Tazkiyah path or a Tazkiyah course. If you're learning to, if you're walking the path and you're learning the concepts, some of them should be talked about earlier and some of them should be talked about later. But I am mixing them up a little bit just so that it doesn't become too technical and too boring or too dry. And if you're wondering at what point do we start talking about the tears and the feelings of closeness and all the practices and stuff, none of that is possible. I can't even. In Tazkiyah, you don't even talk about those things before you have clarity on a number of basic concepts. It's not worth even going down that route. Like talking about Tazkiyah from a perspective of giving the examples of those who achieve a certain degree of khushu' and hudur. And see, these things, as important as they are, and they may be the objective of learning Tazkiyah, but you can't get there without having clarity on some of these basic concepts. Just understanding self-value and understanding compassion and understanding mortality. These things have to be established first, and they have to be established well first. They are the foundation for Tazkiyah. The reason that the Sahaba were able to achieve these things is because they had clarity on these points. This is what the Quran came and taught for the first 13 years in Mecca. This is what the Prophet ﷺ educated them on, and this is what they embraced as followers. And because they had clarity on these things, it was much easier for them to achieve the milestones that we later on observe about them when we're studying their lives. When we see them being able to achieve a certain degree of closeness and clarity, it's because they had clarity on these concepts. And really, there's no point it's not difficult to make Tazkiyah sessions all wa'adh, to turn them into all emotional reminders, talking about Jannah, talking about Nar, and it'll achieve something for you, for sure. Like, for sure, you'll hear some of these stories, and it may reach your heart at one way or the other. But I'm not doing you a favor because it's a superficial, delusional high that you'll get. It's a spiritual high that you'll experience, but it's short-lived and it's not sustainable. And the reason that it's not sustainable is because there's lack of clarity on some of the foundational and fundamental concepts that allow Islam to exist inside of you in a healthy manner, which is why we're talking about these things. And if you find difficulty wrapping your head around some of these concepts, it's okay. Go back and listen to them a few more times. This course is designed to be, to a certain degree, a reference point for you. I don't expect you to memorize or understand everything that I talk about within one session. But I do think it's worthwhile that you go back and listen to it a few times until you have clarity on it. And then, and only then, will the wa'al that is performed for you actually do you good. The Prophet ﷺ would do wa'al once a week for the Sahaba, and that would be more than enough. They didn't have that's all they needed. Why? Because they had clarity on a number of fundamentals that today most people don't have. Today I'm going to talk to you about Tawakkul. And Tawakkul is an extremely important part of your toolkit as a Muslim. And it's important for a number of reasons. Mainly, Tawakkul is the link, or it's the consequence, or it's the result of your theology. It's the link between your theology and Tazkiyah, your aqeedah. It allows you to practice what you understood. If you learned who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, if you have clarity on the iman billah wal yawm al-akhir, wal rusul, wal kutub, wal qada'i wal qadari khayrihi wa sharrihi min Allah, if you have clarity on these 6 points of iman, the 6 pillars of iman, then the consequence of that, the result of that, is that you end up having tawakkul. So tawakkul is the link between your aqeedah and between your tazkiyah. So it's very important. And the main reason that that's the case is because you and I don't know what's best for us. This is the main point. I'm going to make a couple of points today that are important. Because we don't know what's best for us. We think we do, and we would we would like to believe that we figured out based on our analysis what's best for us in life. And sometimes we're right, and many times we are not. And that is just the reality of the matter. That we don't know what's going to... Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. Sometimes you'll hate something and it's good for you, and sometimes you'll love something and it's bad for you. آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. You don't know who is more beneficial to you, your parents or your children. You don't know. You just don't know what's most beneficial to you. Our job really in life is to analyze and assess, and then say, okay, this is what seems to be the most beneficial thing. Ya Rabb, grant it to me, and you work towards it. We don't know for sure if it's going to make you happy, or if it's going to actually be beneficial for you or not. This concept in the Quran is very clear. And the Prophet ﷺ explained that to us as well. And you find this piece of wisdom all across cultures. Every culture knows this, whether they are religious or they are not. And probably the American or Canadian or North American example, the European example, that the proverb or the story that they tell to learn this, I'm just giving you an example because this exists in every culture, is the story, it's called Who Knows? And to summarize it for you, an old man has a neighbor. And one day, he's on a ranch and he has he has horses. And the horses break out of the ranch one day, and they run into the forest. So the neighbor comes and says, "Oh, what a horrible thing happened to you, my neighbor." So he tells him, he says, "Who knows?" That's it. So the neighbor finds it very weird response, like whatever. So he goes. The next day, these horses come back and they bring with them a rare stallion. So the neighbor comes back and he says, "Oh, what an amazing thing that happened this morning." And he says, "Who knows?" And then his son tries to get on top of that stallion. He falls and he breaks his arm. The neighbor comes back and he says, "Oh, what a horrible thing that's happened to your son today." He says, "Who knows?" The next day, the recruiters for the army come and they try to take his son to the army, but his hand's broken, so they can't take him. So the neighbor comes back and says, "Oh, what a great thing that broke your... Who knows?" Right? And I can go on forever. I could literally go on forever. Just keep on going. The concept, this is a non-religious way of telling the story. It's a non-religious way, but you get the point. You don't know. You don't know what's best for you. You have no idea what the outcome's going to look. You just don't know. And because of that, how do you deal with things? That's what tawakkul is. How do I deal with all these things that are happening when I don't know what's best for me, what's not? That's what tawakkul is. It's the link. It's the way that you're going to deal with all of these things. Another point is that nothing that comes to you is labeled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All that you get are trials. You don't get it, it's not labeled as good or bad, good or evil. Nothing. It just comes as a test, a part of life. You label it. You hold the labeling gun. Right? The labeling gun is tawakkul. You label what comes to you, whether it's good or whether it's bad, depending on how you deal with it. Like you will make anything that occurs to you in your life a ni'mah, a blessing, or you can make it a niqmah, an act of wrath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on how you decide to deal with it. Whether that may be wealth, if you get a lot of wealth, you use it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you infaq sadaqat, you take care of your family, then it's a ni'mah. If you took that wealth and you spent it on booze and haram and women, then now it was the worst thing that ever happened to you. Same thing if, la samahullah, you go into a misfortune. La samahullah, may Allah protect all of you, inshallah. If you end up having a disease of some sort, it could be a ni'mah if you show perseverance. It could be a niqmah if it causes you to lose your faith altogether. So really, what you have, what comes to you in this life, is not labeled. People always ask me this question, and it's irritating. Astaghfirullah, may Allah forgive me. But I find it because these are basic stuff in Islam. Everyone should know this, ya akhi. We're talking about, people are talking about they want to connect to Allah, and they don't. And this basic thing is not understood. What happened to me? Is this an act of ghadab from Allah? You think I know? How do you think I know this? Like what tools do you expect me to have to know this? No one knows that. And you cannot call anything that happens to you ghadab from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How could you say that? Like you don't know, unless your story is in the Quran, where Allah is saying that this is ghadab, then you have no way to know this. You just got a difficult test. So you take it, show perseverance, and that will be the best thing that ever happened to you Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawm al-Qiyamah, you'll prefer it. It's absolutely insane. Yawm al-Qiyamah, you will prefer it. You will prefer to find, you're looking for the difficulties because they're tax-free. The difficulties that you persevered for and you showed sabr, the ajr, the reward for that is tax-free because it was a difficulty. All good things that come your way, that you did well with, they're taxed. Meaning you owe the equivalent at least for the good thing that happened, and then if you did enough good with it, then you'll get a little bit extra ajr because you were given something of ease. So you're using it for something for khair is a good thing, obviously, but you still owe gratitude for that thing. You owe gratitude for the good thing that came your way. So you have to show enough gratitude for that, and then extra to get the ajr. Right? You have to make up for the fact that you were given ease. And then you have to do more to get the ajr. But when you have a difficulty, there's nothing to make up for. This is tax-free ajr yawm al-qiyamah. So people prefer this. In life, we don't prefer it. We want ease because we don't want to struggle or suffer. But yawm al-qiyamah, you're looking for that. That's what you're looking for. So what you get in life, it's not labeled. Nothing can be labeled. Unless your story is divine, unless it's Quranic, unless it's somewhere where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has labeled this as wrath, you have no way to know this. And for you to assume that is actually the beginning of making it that. Because it's how shaitan gets to you. It's like, man, this is ghadab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises you. No. فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا. No, that's not what it is. I find difficulty, Allah must hate me. No, ya akhi, no, that's not how this works. A third point that needs to be made here, so that tawakkul is clear. Because tawakkul is how you're dealing with all of this. Tawakkul is how you're labeling it. Tawakkul is how is that you have to identify the difference between that which you can control and that which you cannot control. They're different things, and you have to be able to identify the difference between them. If you can't, we're in trouble. And a lot of times people don't seem to know the difference between what you can control and what you can't control. There are things that you have no control over. And tawakkul is made of 3 parts. The first part is dropped when you have no control over things. When you have no influence, then the part of you doing your best or you putting in your 100% effort, that piece is gone because there's nothing for you to do here. This was an act of divine decree from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty. So you can't really you can't change anything. On the other hand, identifying where you have a role, where there's something that you could do here. There is something that you can perform, an action, and something that you can influence the outcome, or you can protect yourself or prevent harm, or bring forward an outcome of goodness or benefit. You have to be able to identify. Tawakkul is the one action that it links ghaib and shahada in life. It links the world of the unseen and the world of the seen, which is what we live in and what we are capable of identifying. Tawakkul brings them both together. It's the only action that does that, which is why it's so important. Because there's so many, the qada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decree of Allah, is a part of the unseen. We don't see it. We don't know. It's a part of His realm subhanahu wa ta'ala that we don't fully understand. Tawakkul is important for us to be able to identify what is coming our way that we have no control over, and what it is that we truly have control over. Now that being said, tawakkul is made of 3 components. The first component is al-amal, is badl al-juhd, istifragh al-wusa', where you put in your effort. You try your best. You do your part. You accept responsibility for the things that you're capable of influencing. You have to try your best. If you are not trying your best, then using the term tawakkul for yourself is not accurate. You can use other terms. You can use other terms. معتمد على الله سبحانه وتعالى. متوسل. I'm begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a good outcome. I'm asking. But you can't use the word tawakkul if you had something that you could have done and you did not at least try it to the best of your ability. Right? Now, if you identify that you could have done more but you didn't, and you do as much as you can at that moment, you can still use the word tawakkul, but you have understanding that you did not put in your effort. Meaning that there's a piece here that's missing that you should have actually fulfilled. And this is very important because without this piece, there's something, we end up running into trouble. We run into trouble where tawakkul becomes a reason for people not to do their part anymore. And if tawakkul turns into that, then it becomes a numbing agent. It becomes a tool that numbs you, a tool that you use to justify lack of effort. It becomes an action. It becomes an Islamic tool that you use rationalize why you're not doing it. You become passive. You become passive, and that's not what tawakkul is about. Tawakkul is not a passive tool. Tawakkul is an active one, where when there is any possibility of you doing something, you're going to do it, and you're going to do your absolute best towards it. So if you have an exam the next day, for example, this is the simplest of examples. If you have studied and done your best, then you can say, I'm mutawakkil. You have the first element of tawakkul. You can talk about the other two elements. If you have not, then you can't really say that you are mutawakkil regarding this exam. You can say it at the moment where you identify that you have the exam, you tried your best for that maybe hour before the exam or two or whatever, but you can't say that in general your approach to this exam was with tawakkul. You can't, because you didn't really put in your effort. You should have put in your effort. You did not. You can still ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you success and a pass score, but you can't really say that I was mutawakkil within this story, because that an element, a very critical element was missing, which is you needed to study and you did not. You did not put in your effort. Now you cannot put 100%, like there's no such thing as being 100%. We're all going to have shortcomings and flaws as we try, but at least you tried your best. Like you tried the best you could, knowing that the best you could was not the best in general, and it was not flawless, and it was not perfect, but it was the best you could do, given the circumstances that you were in. So the first piece is doing that, is doing your best. The second piece is the dependence upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that the outcomes come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not from the effort that you put in. And this is easy actually. And tawakkul, as many aspects of Islam, carries within it the paradox of, well, why would I depend on him if I've done everything I can? If I know the curriculum, forwards and backwards, why do I need to have tawakkul? Well, because there's a million ways for you to still fail this course. Like there's an infinite number of ways for you to still fail, even though you know the content. You can get hit by a car on your way there. You could get there and then you don't get any sleep overnight. You get there, you can't function, you can't focus properly. You get sick, that's Allah. There's a million things that could happen that will deprive you or come between you and achieving your objective or passing this exam. Going into similar examples for everything in life. You'll do your part, and then people will feel, well, I don't need tawakkul. No, you do, because there's a lot that could still happen that will take away from you the outcome. There's so many things. How many people have sat in front of an exam, misread the question, literally misread the question, answered it in the wrong way, and then failed in finding out that they just didn't read it properly. The question was in the positive terms, not in the negative terms. You thought it was asking for what isn't, and it was asking for what is, or vice versa, and you fail because you didn't focus. There's an infinite number of possibilities for you not to do well. So having that dependence upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where still, I've done my part, but it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who delivers the outcome, or doesn't deliver the outcome, whatever He wants to do subhanahu wa ta'ala. I trust Him, and I know that He is taking care of my affairs. That's what tawakkul is. You entrust your affairs with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whatever He does, you know that He cares for you, He's looking out for you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there's a plan for you, and that whatever comes is going to be something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was observing. It wasn't neglected. It didn't happen out of randomness. It was not an act of lack of attention. That's if you put it with me. I may forget about your case and not pay attention to it. That's when you put it with the human being. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's fully aware. So that's your dependence upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third piece, which is, in my opinion, the most important piece of all, which is content, which is rida. Rida here is not about yourself. You're not content with what you did. You're not content with your effort or your behavior. No, that's not what you're content with. Actually, you're always holding yourself accountable for how much more you could have done. You're holding yourself accountable for your shortcomings. You're holding yourself accountable for the mistakes and the flaws within the effort that you put. Content here is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. Whatever He delivers to you subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're content, you're happy with it, you're satisfied. أمر رضيه الله لك فرضيته لنفسك. Something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted for you, so you accept for yourself. And the examples of this within our history, amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, is endless of them showing rida. And rida is two things in essence. It is when you get something good, you show shukr. That's what rida. Rida manifests itself in the form of shukr, of gratitude when you have something you like, or it manifests itself in the form of sabr, perseverance, when you don't get what you like. So when you have what you want, you're going to show gratitude. When you don't have what you want, you're going to show perseverance. And those two things put together is the actions of someone who has rida, someone who's content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends their way. It's easy to show rida when you get what you want. You think it's easy, but it isn't actually. It's way easier to show rida when it's difficult, because sabr is straightforward. It's simple. It's a one moment action. It's just a simple mentality of acceptance and perseverance. It's not that complicated. Gratitude is actually complex and it's difficult. You never know, have you shown enough gratitude? How much gratitude do I need to show? How much time do I need to spend using this blessing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You don't know. So it's hard to figure out. It's easier for us, we want it, but Yawm al-Qiyamah it's much more complex. We don't know if we showed enough gratitude or not. But rida is the cornerstone of understanding tawakkul, where you have content regarding what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent your way. And the examples of that are so many. I'm going to share with you a story that I think is it's an interesting one. Regardless, it's something to learn from. Where Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, rahimahullah, one of the great scholars of our ummah, one of the tabi'een, كان يسمى عابد الحرمين. He was known as the worshipper of the two harams because he would spend 6 months in Mecca and 6 months in Medina, worshipping and teaching, because he was a alim, so he would stay there for 6 months teaching people and performing qiyam al-layl in those places. So he was well known, and he's a lot of our ilm and knowledge comes through Fudayl, rahimahullah. And he was known to be extremely serious man. He rarely ever smiled. His students would say he would never smile. He was always كده على طول. And he was someone, he had hayba, he had a certain degree of reverence. People revered him, people respected him. And his students say that one day he was in a session of teaching, and the khabar, a piece of information came to him, telling him that his son, his eldest son, had died. That his eldest son had died. And he said, at that moment, for the first time in years, we saw Al-Fudayl smile. We saw him smile. So people came and asked him later, after the janazah and all that, Ya Imam, why would you smile? Like, you never smile. Why specifically now? فقال حتى لا يظن ربي أنني غير راضٍ. That my Lord does not think for a moment or that I'm not content. So I smiled to show content, right? Now, scholars argued that was that the best thing to do? Or if you wanted to cry, is crying not showing rida? No, crying is fine. The Prophet ﷺ cried, and he said, وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْضِي رَبَّنَا. We only say that which satisfies, shows rida from us, that we are content. But Al-Fudayl, because emotionally, apparently he had a struggle in his life. Some people struggle with showing emotions. For whatever reason, whatever upbringing they had, he struggles to show emotion. So when he was given the bad news, he wanted to show an emotion that was going to reflect rida, even though necessarily that maybe not be the most natural emotion, so he smiled to show rida. But the scholars said, no, crying and speaking of rida was probably a better choice here, but I thought it was interesting that this is how important this showing rida at the right moment is to even the tabi'een. Like, this is something to show rida at the moment that things happen. Those are the three elements of tawakkul. Now, what do the three of the elements offer you in life? If you do them, what do you get? Well, number one, you get rid of being dependent on your deeds. And this is a huge title in Tazkiyah that I can't really break down for you in depth today, but I'm trying to summarize quickly. There's a problem of i'timad ala al-amal, of us becoming dependent on our deeds. Meaning we depend on our deeds in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We depend on our deeds in terms of making it to Jannah. We depend on our deeds in terms of our self-value. And this is a problem. If you depend on your deeds, then you're in trouble. You never depend. يقول ابن عطاء الله من علامات الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. Because if you depend on your deeds, when you don't have good deeds, you start feeling less about yourself. You start feeling that you're not worthy as a Muslim. But not having the good deeds, not making the right choices will send you down a completely different route, and it'll ruin your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't depend on your deeds. You're happy. You're satisfied. You're extremely optimistic when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you the opportunity to do good deeds. And you want to hold on to them, but you don't depend on them. You depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dependence is not on what you're doing. Because what you're doing is not offering him anything, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not strengthening him in any way. There's no value, there's no real value to Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the dependence has to be upon Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, not upon your deeds. Number two, it rids you from depression and disgruntlement. People, when things don't go your way, when you don't get what you want, when you do everything right, when you take every step appropriate towards achieving a goal and it still fails, you don't get it, people come to the moment where maybe they want to object to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, get upset, become disgruntled, having sukht. مَنْ رَضِيَ فَلَهُ الرِّضَى وَمَنْ سَخِطَ فَلَهُ السُّخَطُ. Those who accept Allah's decree, then they get that. They get content. That's what they get. And those who object and are hateful towards this outcome, then that's what they're going to get. They're going to get hate, and they're going to get disgruntlement, and they're going to get upset. So it rids you from this problem of objecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which technically in its essence is an act of kufr. In its essence is an act of kufr. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you your way an outcome that you don't like, and you object to Allah, or you refuse that which Allah gave you subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is an act of kufr in its essence. It's a very dangerous thing. So tawakkul removes that for you. You have tawakkul, then you're not going to fall into that trap. Because, well, did you do your job, or was there something for you to do, or was there not something for you to do? You've established that. You depend upon Allah, and you're content with whatever He gives you subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have a little bit of immunity. Number three, it is the one act in Islam that brings together two important concepts: ambition and acceptance. Because you need both. Tawakkul and i'timad ala Allah and rida, all these terms do not mean that you are someone who lacks aspirations and lacks ambition. Content does not mean that you don't look forward to great things in life. That's not what content means. Content is with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for you in terms of outcome after you put in everything you could, after you tried your best. That's content. It's accepting the outcome, allowing you to take the next step afterwards, whether it's a good outcome or a bad outcome. Content does not cause you to become someone who lacks aspirations and ambitions. Quite honestly, it's the opposite. It allows you to be, which is the fourth point, allows you to be ambitious. So when we talk about ambition and we talk about content, we're talking about two different things. And tawakkul allows for both. Allows you to be ambitious, but at the same time have content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent your way. Because if you don't have content, then we have a problem, because you're going to only be doing well if you get what you want. And then if you don't get what you want, you become extremely depressed, and then you can't move anymore. The fourth point is that tawakkul allows you to have a certain degree of courage and bravery when it comes to haqq. Because when you know what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the right thing to do is, if the right thing to do is a scary thing to do, it's scary because with it comes consequences that are not desired. With that comes a certain risk. But if you know this is what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you depend on Allah and you take that stance. You take that position because you know Allah subhanahu, because you depend on Him. Tawakkul grants you a certain degree of courage because you know that your matters are in His hands, that He does not neglect you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased when you do this, and that He will choose for you the outcome that He sees fit. If you know that, you have a certain degree of calmness in your heart, and you're capable of taking a stance that is scary, knowing that it pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tawakkul is the one thing that grants you in your life a certain degree of bravery and courage. And Muslims need this. You are not, being Muslim does not cause you to become someone who is with cowardice or with ongoing fear. No, your fear is from not taking a position that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the opposite, because He's your trustee. You entrust him with your matter. So if you entrust Him, then you'll take the stance that pleases Him, and you'll have the courage to do that when it's difficult. The fifth and final piece that you benefit from this is that tawakkul takes away within your life, it takes away from you the problem of feeling that it's all for nothing, or feeling that you are neglected or missed. مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. That the Prophet ﷺ, the beginning of his da'wah, when he was left for 6 months without revelation, he started to wonder to himself, what happened here? Have I been forgotten? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not please? Does He not want to speak to me? وَمَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord did not neglect you or forget about you, ever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching upon you. But He left for you to kind of figure out what your plan was going to be. The same thing for all of us. That even if things go wrong, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't care for us or that we're on the wrong side of it all. Not at all. It's the opposite. We are just being tested and trialed. And the more difficult the tests and the trials, the more tawakkul that we show, the more rida, the more sabr, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with us. So it protects you from that feeling of being lost, of being neglected, being out there in the wilderness alone. Now that being said, all that, when you look at Allah's decree in this world, you have 4 options. And if you attended my tazkiyah, you'll learn the 4 options. Either what you get is good, meaning it's easy, it's something of ease, or what you get is difficult, right? Either khair or dur in your life. You get something of ease or something of difficulty. That's 2 options. The other 2 options, whether either you're doing something that leads to one of these things, meaning either you got a logical consequence, meaning you were working towards this outcome and then you got the outcome, or you got an irrational, illogical consequence, meaning you're working towards this and you got the opposite. So these are the 2 options. If you pair them up, you end up with 4 outcomes, 4 different outcomes. Either you worked towards khair and you got it, and that's qadr, or you worked towards shar and you got it, and that's qadr. So if I studied my head off and I passed, that's qadr. If I didn't and I failed, that's qadr, right? Or I worked towards something good and I didn't get it, that's qada. I got the opposite. I studied really hard and I failed anyways. Yeah. Or I didn't work towards it and I got something good. Like I didn't work towards khair and I got it. So I didn't study, but I passed. Right? These are the 4 options. So and that's qada. So within Islam, you have these 4 options: 2 qadr and 2 qada, based on whether what you got was the rational outcome of what you did, that's qadr, or you got the irrational or illogical outcome for what you did, and that is qada. Tazkiyah allows you only to see 2 of these things. You only see 2 of them. People who have tawakkul will only see 2 of them. They will only see when they worked towards something that was not good and it happened, they see that. When they work towards something good and it happened, they don't see that. They don't see that to be something, that's not an option that they're accepting. That I worked towards something good and I got it. No, they never see that. They see themselves always to be flawed. They see always their effort to be shortcoming and for it not to be perfect. And because of that, they don't accept that I worked towards something and I got it. It was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave it to me. The good things I got were irrational. They were illogical. They were a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I didn't work towards them. When they don't work towards the option of I didn't work towards the bad outcome but I got it, they don't see that either. Because they always see themselves to be flawed. They always see their effort not to be perfect. So when something bad happens, they hold themselves accountable. They don't say, oh, I worked towards something good but I got something bad. They wouldn't say that. And that's where tawakkul helps you. Tawakkul allows you to always see things, just see the 2 options. If you got something good, you see it from Allah. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. And if you had something bad, you see yourself accountable for it and you hold yourself accountable and you revise your plans and you see what it is that you could have done better in order to get the outcome. But you don't accept the other 2 options. You're not accepting that I did good and I got good. No, that's vain. I don't want that. This is the truth. I don't accept it. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I worked towards something good and I got something bad. No, I don't see that either. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never do that to me. Allah subhanahu my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is of the nature where I don't accept that option altogether. And this is what tawakkul allows you to do. Tawakkul allows you to see yourself in the world in that form. Where good things you get from Allah, you are immediately grateful for. You feel overwhelmed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's generosity. And the bad things that happen, you hold yourself accountable for them and you work towards them and you do not blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for any of them. And that is what tawakkul allows you to do. If you practice, it's a practical aspect of tazkiyah and of Islam in general. If you learn to practice it, then it will grant you immunity from responding to that which happens to you in your life in a negative way. It will allow you to respond appropriately every time. It will put you in the right mindset when good things happen because you show rida and then you're going to be grateful. It allows you to be in the right mindset if bad things happen to you. You show rida in the form of sabr. And either way, in both ways, you have a heavy dependence upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which grants you a certain degree of courage and bravery in speaking the truth and standing by haqq. And if that's a little bit complicated, that's okay. You can go back and listen to it again and make sure that you can wrap your head around it. But the concept of tawakkul is absolutely critical. Without it, you can't function as Muslim. You don't function as a Muslim without tawakkul. Tawakkul is one of the major or main differences between how Muslims see the world, how Muslims deal with the world, everything in the world, and how non-Muslims deal with it. I'll end with that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك عظم على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.